We begin part 2 of our video on chapter 4 by discussing writing in teams. Team documents are necessary when you face big projects, short deadlines, or a project that requires diverse perspectives or insights. Some students just really enjoy group projects, others don't. It's a fact of life in the workplace. And the reason that some people don't like writing in teams is because you have to depend on others. And depending on the structure of the team, you may have people in there that are less motivated to really work hard on the project, and you may not have on the team someone who can really, let's say, exert pressure on the team members to do their part so that everybody participates somewhat equally. You may recall in class I mentioned the notion of the law of least love, which says that in a relationship, let's say a simple one where you have two people, if one cares significantly more than the other about the relationship, the one who cares less, that is, the one who cares least about the relationship, is more or less in the driver's seat because the one who cares most about maintaining the relationship is going to bend over backwards and do whatever is necessary to keep the relationship going. And so it is in a group project that can evidence itself by someone who really cares more, for instance, about succeeding in the project. Maybe they've got more on the line in terms of a grade or in terms of an evaluation, or maybe a particular person has prospects for advancement, and this project is going to be, let's say, an important stepping stone for them. You may have other people on the team that aren't in that position, who don't care as much about whether the project is successful. So that can be a tough situation to be in, and sometimes you just have to you have to buck up and you have to do extra work, or if you can, you try to motivate those people kind of hiding out and get them to be more involved and to live up to their potential and also their obligations in the team. But it can be pretty tough, and especially top performing students, for instance, oftentimes prefer to do the work themselves than have to rely on others. But you'll find in life that although we like to think oftentimes of ourselves as being individualistic and I'm the captain of my own ship, for the most part we understand that the greatest joys in life, the greatest successes are going to be in the company of others. In a relationship, for instance, a marital relationship, in a family, in a church, in a community organization, or of course in a business. Why are team-written documents better? Well, the answer is just collaboration. That is, co-laboring, people working together and contributing contributing from their own individual skills. How does the process work? Well, in pre-writing, this can involve brainstorming, where you've got everybody together who's brainstorming to determine the purpose of the project or the organization, who the audience is, to determine the content and evaluate the content, what needs to be conveyed, design, presentations. There's a lot in pre-writing where you can plan and think together about how this project is going to unfold. The actual writing is where you may need to assign sections for individual work and research, organize findings, composing first drafts. This is going to be problematic, of course, if you've got very different writing styles that in a particular project, someone's going to have to pull that together later on. That can be a real challenge. Revising, collaboration to synthesize the parts. One person may have the task of checking for flow. That can be a real problem if let's say you've got people working individually on their parts, and then you've got one person or a couple of people who are responsible for pulling it all together and making sense of it. It can be a real problem, especially if those people doing the writing, knowing somebody is coming behind them to fix things, they simply don't do the job that they should have done to begin with. I may in class tell you about a particular painful experience related to this from my own past. On page 148 in your book, there are a number of online resources that will, for instance, through Microsoft Word, where you can track the revisions and the edits, the contributions that various members of the team have made. You know, whenever you work together, there's going to be to some degree of people stepping on each other's toes. Very rarely is if you're a picky person, is someone else's work going to live up to everything you wish it could be? And so, any type of team project is to some degree a compromise, or requires compromise on various people's parts. It's just something to recognize and be ready for. In analyzing and anticipating, let's take a step back and look at what's happening in this section. Analyzing the task, we're identifying the purpose of the project, and this is really true whether it's a group project or whether it's an individual one. It may be something very simple like writing a letter to someone to tell them that they've been accepted for a scholarship, or telling someone they've not been accepted to the university, or they've been turned down for a scholarship they applied for. Identifying what the purpose is. Who's the audience? Who are the primary receivers and the secondary receivers? The primary receivers are usually pretty evident. They're the ones to whom the message is given. Secondary receivers may be people who receive it even unintentionally. I remember some years ago seeing there was a situation even at Faulkner where a faculty member was not happy with the club induction process that was going on. And so this person emailed another another staff member on campus who had some responsibilities for the club induction process. Well, I think they caught this second person, the staff member, at a bad time, because this staff member then kind of responded in a snippy way, maybe an offhand way. They were tired. It was during induction week. They probably didn't think through it like they would have. Well, this faculty member then was offended by that, and instead of going back to that person and saying, "Look, you shouldn't have responded this way, and I don't think you really meant this," that faculty member then forwarded that email to a number of other people across campus, a number of other administrators, and it put that staff member in a very difficult and bad light. It's not a very fair thing to do, but as a matter of fact, some would even argue it's illegal, but we'll talk about that maybe in class, why that might be the case. But to forward someone's email, for instance, without their permission. But the point is here, you may have secondary receivers, and you need to think about who else might be getting this. Who might this be shared with? Selecting the best channel. The channel has to do with the medium that you choose to use, whether it's face-to-face conversation, whether it's a phone conversation, a text, email, memo, whatever it might be. In general, if a message is very sensitive, you want all the cues that you can get when you relay it, like letting someone go. You wouldn't fire someone or tell them they're being fired by email. It would be very insensitive. Or text message. You really need to sit down and have a face-to-face with that person. You think about how important feedback is to having an effective communication, and whether there's a permanent record required. Whether you want to have a paper trail to back up or to show what was actually shared. Degree of formality. A letter is more formal than an email, and email is more formal than a text message. So those are things to consider. Choosing the channels. As we can see here, there's a number of channels, and the best use for those channels. Face-to-face conversation is really good when you're sharing personal message. You want to be persuasive. You want to deliver bad news. It is the richest communication channel because you have all the verbal and the nonverbal cues. Telephone call is a quick and easy way. You do have some verbal cues, but you don't have the nonverbal ones. You can't see someone's face. You can still hear the voice inflection and tone, and that's important. That's something you wouldn't have, for instance, in an email. A voicemail message, they'll leave a message for response when convenient, but that's not the sort of thing where you don't want to open the proverbial can of worms and kind of throw a grenade through a voicemail message. And you don't want to leave a voicemail message because simply you don't have the guts to talk to the person face to face, or you don't want to bother with talking to another human being. A fax has its place still for sending documents quickly. Email to exchange information conveniently and quickly, but problematic for some messages, as we'll see later on. You don't want to send long, drawn-out messages by email. Many people, when they open an email, if they will not read, or it's unlikely they're going to read much more than what they can see at the top half of the page. That is what opens up on their screen. So that's something to realize with regard to the limitations of emails. Other channels here: face-to-face group meetings or video conferencing, memos, letters, and reports. Each has its use, as you can see here, its place. Face-to-face group meetings, when group decisions and consensus are important, when you need to have those real-time discussions, to hash things out. Video or teleconferencing is good to disperse data. It's not very good when you actually want people to participate, or you got large groups, or and you want people to actually participate in the meetings themselves. If you just simply want them to have them to hear what's being said, those are fine. But generally, face-to-face meetings are going to be a richer context. Memos to produce formal written record for insiders. You don't write memos to those outside your organization. That's strictly inside the organization. The letter is a very formal written record for customers and other outsiders. And then a report is going to be a lengthier document whereby you deliver some more complex, maybe technical data, whether it's internally or potentially externally for say, a government organization or for a customer. Adapting to task and audience. What we want to do is take what's called the U view. Cultivate the U view. Think about the other person, what they need to hear, how they're going to receive it. Spotlight receiver benefits whenever possible. Use sensitive language to avoid anything that smacks of bias, either in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, age, and disability. Express thoughts positively. Try to be as positive, and we'll try to be positive. We'll try to be direct when in most business communication. Use familiar words. Things that are commonly used. There's a place for more formality, but in general, we want to make what we have to say accessible. Don't make people work too hard for it. It's not the time in business to try to impress people with your vocabulary. Use precise and vigorous words. Action verbs, for instance, we've talked about on your resume. In developing reader benefits, we want to think about, there we go. We want to think about how we can emphasize to the reader that it's about them. Here's a sender-focused message. We're requiring all staffers to complete these forms in compliance with company policy. A receiver focus says, please complete these forms so that you'll be eligible for health and dental benefits. It talks about why they should do that. It coaxes them to do it instead of beating them over the head with some demand. Here's another one. Because we need more space for our new inventory, we're staging a 2-for-1 sale. Well, why don't you think of the reader and how does it benefit them? They don't care about whether or not we need more space. What they care about is what advantage it may provide them. And that is that they're going to get it for a sale price. Here's an example of the U view. I'll tell you what, I'll come back to this on the next slide, on the next video. I'll start up here on the next video.